You wake up every day with the same thoughts, the same habits, the same excuses, and deep down, you already know the truth. You can't keep living like this anymore. Not like this, not stuck, not settling, not watching your own life pass you by while you tell yourself, well, tomorrow will be different. Okay? How many tomorrows have you already wasted? At some point, you have to be honest with yourself. This version of you, the one who hesitates, who overthinks, who waits for the perfect moment, that version is holding you back. And no one is coming to fix it for you. No sudden miracle. No perfect opportunity. No magical burst of motivation that lasts forever. It's just you. And that might sound harsh, but it's actually powerful. Because if it's on you, then it's in your control. Right now, you have a choice. You can stay in the same loop, same routine, same complaints, same comfort zone. Or you can decide that enough is enough. Because this isn't about being perfect. It's about being done with the life that drains you, done with the habits that keep you small, done with the fear that convinces you not to try. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Stop saying, I'll start when I feel ready. You'll never feel ready. Stop saying it's too late. It's not too late. You're just afraid to begin. Stop saying that this is just who I am. No, it's who you've been choosing to be. There's a difference. Growth is uncomfortable, change is uncomfortable, but staying stuck, that's a different kind of pain. The kind that slowly eats away at your confidence, your energy, your belief in yourself. And you feel it, don't you? That quiet frustration, that voice in your head saying, you're meant for more than this. Listen to that voice, because it's right. You are meant for more discipline, more courage, more action, more light. But it starts with a decision, not a big dramatic one, but a real one. Decision that today is the day you stop negotiating with your excuses. A decision that even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't feel like it, you move anyway. Because the truth is, the life you want isn't going to come from thinking about it. It's built through action, through consistency, through showing up when it would be easier not to. You don't need to change everything overnight. Just prove to yourself that you can take one step, then another, then another. That's how you rebuild your confidence, not by waiting, but by doing. So ask yourself, honestly, how much longer are you going to accept a life that you know isn't your best? How much longer will you delay becoming the person you already know you can be? You wake up at the same time, follow the same routine, think the same thoughts, react the same way to challenges, and repeat the same patterns day after day. It feels normal because it's familiar, but familiarity is not the same as progress. When you're on autopilot, you're not actively choosing your direction. You're just continuing what you've already programmed into your life, whether it's good for you or not. The danger is that this mode feels comfortable. It doesn't demand much from you. You don't have to think deeply, take risks, or face the discomfort of change. You just go through the motions. But while you're staying comfortable, time is moving. Days turn into months, months turn into years, and suddenly you look back and realize nothing meaningful has changed. That's the cost of autopilot. It quietly steals your potential while making you believe everything is fine. Huge role in this. The small things you do every day shape the bigger picture of your life. If your daily routine is built around distraction, avoidance, or minimal effort, then your results will reflect that. Not because you lack ability, but because your actions are not aligned with who you want to become. Autopilot keeps you tied to these habits because it removes awareness. You're not questioning what you're doing. You're just doing it. Your mindset is another part of the trap. The thoughts you repeat become beliefs, and those beliefs influence your decision. If you constantly tell yourself things like, this is just how I am, or I can't do better, then you stop trying. You accept limitations that may not even be real. On autopilot, these thoughts go unchallenged. They become the default script running in your mind, shaping your life without your permission. What makes this even more difficult is that autopilot often disguises itself as stability. You might think, at least things aren't getting worse, or this is good enough. But a good enough can be one of the most dangerous mindsets because it keeps you from striving for better. It convinces you to settle, even when you know deep down you're capable of more. Over time, that quiet sense of dissatisfaction grows, and you start to feel stuck without fully understanding why. Breaking out of this cycle starts with awareness. You have to pause and honestly look at your life, not the version you tell others, but the reality of your daily actions and thoughts. Ask yourself if what you're doing today is actually moving you forward or just keeping you in place. This kind of honesty can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. You can't change what you refuse to see. Once you become aware, you begin to notice patterns. You see where you're wasting time, where you're avoiding effort, where you're choosing comfort over growth. And this awareness gives you power. It reminds you that you're not stuck, you've just been operating without intention. There's a difference. Being stuck implies there's no way out, but operating on autopilot means you haven't been actively steering your life. Taking back control doesn't require a complete overhaul overnight. It starts with small, deliberate choices. Choosing to be present instead of distracted. Choosing to act instead of delay. Choosing to question the thoughts that hold you back instead of accepting them as truth. These small shifts begin to reprogram your habits and your mindset. The key is to stay conscious. Autopilot will always try to pull you back because it's easy and familiar. But every time you make a decision with intention, you weaken that pull. You remind yourself that you are in control of your actions, your thoughts, and ultimately your direction. You don't have to accept a life that runs by default. You can choose to live with purpose, with awareness, and with direction. But it starts with recognizing that if you keep going the way you are, unaware, unintentional, and comfortable, you'll keep getting the same results. And if those results aren't enough for you, then something has to change. Waiting for the perfect moment is one of the most convincing excuses you can tell yourself because it sounds reasonable. It feels smart to wait until you're fully prepared, fully confident, and certain everything will go smoothly. But that moment you're waiting for doesn't actually exist. There will always be something missing, something uncertain, something that makes you hesitate. If you keep waiting for ideal conditions, you'll stay exactly where you are. The idea of a perfect starting point creates a false sense of control. It makes you believe that if you plan enough, think enough, and prepare enough, you can avoid mistakes or discomfort. But growth doesn't work like that. Progress is messy. It involves trial and error, uncertainty, and learning as you go. By waiting, you're not protecting yourself. You're delaying the very process that would help you improve. Fear plays a big role in this pattern. Sometimes it's obvious, but often it's hidden behind logic. You might tell yourself you need more time, more knowledge, or better circumstances. But underneath all of that is the fear of failing, of being judged, or of not being good enough. Waiting becomes a way to avoid facing that fear. It gives you a temporary sense of safety, but it also keeps you from moving forward. The longer you wait, the heavier it becomes. What started as a small hesitation turns into a habit of delay. You begin to overthink everything, analyzing every possible outcome instead of taking action. This creates a cycle where thinking replaces doing. You feel busy in your mind, but in reality, nothing changes. Time keeps passing, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be grows wider. Another problem with waiting is that it slowly erodes your confidence. Confidence doesn't come from thinking about doing something, it comes from actually doing it. Every time you delay action, you reinforce the idea that you're not ready. Over time, this belief becomes stronger, making it even harder to start. On the other hand, taking action, even imperfect action, builds momentum, shows you that you're capable of moving forward despite uncertainty. There's also the illusion that starting later will somehow make things easier. You might think that if you wait until you feel more motivated or more inspired, the process will be smoother, but motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, often when you least expect it. If you rely on it to begin, you'll find yourself constantly postponing your goals. Discipline, not motivation, is what creates consistent progress. The truth is, most people who achieve meaningful results didn't start when everything was perfect. They started when things were unclear, when they felt unsure, and when they didn't have all the answers. They figure things out along the way. That's how progress actually works. You take a step, learn from it, adjust, and then take another step. Waiting for certainty only keeps you from entering that cycle. Action has a way of creating clarity. When you begin, you start to see what works and what doesn't. You gain real experience instead of relying on assumptions. Problems that seemed overwhelming in your mind often become manageable once you face them directly. This is something you can't achieve through thinking alone. You have to move to understand. It's important to realize that starting doesn't mean committing to a perfect plan or a guaranteed outcome. It simply means choosing to begin. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to be willing to take the first step, even if it's small. That step breaks the cycle of waiting and shifts you into action. You might not feel ready, and that's normal. Readiness is not a requirement for starting. It's often a result of it. As you take action, you adapt, learn, and grow into the role you once felt unprepared for. But that transformation only happens when you stop waiting and start doing. Every day you delay is a day you could have used to improve, to learn, and to move closer to your goals. Time doesn't pause while you prepare. It keeps moving, whether you act or not. The choice is whether you move with it or stay behind, hoping for a moment that will never come. At some point, you have to accept that imperfect action is better than perfect hesitation. You don't need ideal conditions to begin. You just need a decision to stop waiting and take that first step right where you are. Taking full responsibility for your life can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes every excuse you've been holding on to. It means accepting that where you are right now is largely the result of your choices, your habits, and your responses to situation. That doesn't mean everything that has happened to you is your fault, but it does mean that what you do next is entirely in your hands. And that realization can either feel heavy or empowering depending on how you choose to see it. It's easy to shift responsibility onto other people or circumstances. You can blame your environment, your past, your lack of opportunities, or the actions of others. Sometimes those factors are real, and they do make things harder. But when you focus only on what's outside your control, you give away your power. You place your future in the hands of things you cannot change, and that leaves you stuck, waiting for something external to improve before you do. Taking responsibility changes that perspective. It forces you to look at what is within your control, your actions, your effort, your mindset, and your decisions. It asks you to stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what can I do about it? That shift might seem small, but it changes everything. It turns you from a passive participant in your life into an active one. One of the hardest parts of responsibility is honesty. It requires you to stop justifying behaviors that are holding you back. Maybe you procrastinate, avoid difficult tasks, or give up too quickly when things get challenging. It's uncomfortable to admit these patterns, but ignoring them keeps you trapped in the same cycle. When you take responsibility, you acknowledge these habits without excuses, and that awareness becomes the first step toward changing them. Responsibility also means owning your results. If something doesn't go the way you want it, it's easy to look for reasons outside yourself. But growth comes from asking what you could have done differently, not in a way that blames or criticizes yourself, but in a way that helps you learn. When you take ownership of your outcomes, you gain the ability to improve them. You stop repeating the same mistakes because you're actually paying attention to what needs to change. Another important aspect is consistency. Taking responsibility is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Every day you are faced with choices to act or delay, to focus or distract yourself, push forward or stay comfortable. Responsibility means choosing actions that align with your goals, even when it's inconvenient. It means following through on what you said you would do, not just when you feel motivated, but especially when you don't. There's also a sense of discipline that comes with responsibility. You begin to rely less on how you feel in the moment and more on what you know needs to be done. Feelings can change quickly, but your commitment shouldn't. When you take responsibility, you build the habit of doing what is necessary, regardless of temporary emotions. This is what creates real, lasting progress over time. It's important to understand that taking responsibility doesn't mean being overly harsh on yourself. It's not about constant self-criticism or expecting perfection. It's about being fair and realistic. You recognize your mistakes, but you also recognize your ability to improve. You treat yourself as someone who is capable of growth, not someone who is stuck or limited. As you continue to take responsibility, you'll notice a shift in your confidence. Not the kind that comes from empty reassurance, but the kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. You start to trust your ability to handle challenges, to adapt, and to keep moving forward. That trust is built through action, through showing up for yourself again and again. Over time, responsibility becomes less of a burden and more of a strength. It gives you clarity because you're no longer distracted by excuses. It gives you direction because you're actively choosing your path. And most importantly, it gives you control over your life in a way that nothing else can. No one else can make your decisions for you. No one else can put in the effort required to change your situation. People can support you, guide you, and inspire you, but they cannot do the work on your behalf. That part is yours. And once you truly accept that, everything begins to shift. Most people say they want change, but very few are truly willing to accept what comes with it. Growth sounds exciting in theory. It represents progress, success, and becoming something better. But what often gets ignored is the reality that growth is uncomfortable. It challenges your patterns, pushes you into unfamiliar situations, and forces you to confront parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. That discomfort is not a sign that something is changing. Something is changing. The problem is that your mind is wired to seek comfort and avoid pain. It prefers routines that feel safe even if they're holding you back. When you try to step outside of that comfort zone, resistance shows up almost immediately. You might feel doubt, fear, or even the urge to go back to what's familiar. This is where many people stop. They interpret discomfort as a warning instead of recognizing it as part of the process. Choosing growth means choosing a different kind of discomfort, the kind that leads somewhere. There's a big difference between the discomfort of staying the same and the discomfort of moving forward. Staying stuck might feel easier in the moment, but over time it creates frustration, regret, and a sense of wasted potential. It's a quiet kind of pain that builds slowly, often without you realizing it until it becomes overwhelming. On the other hand, the discomfort of growth is more immediate and noticeable. It shows up when you try something new, when you push yourself beyond your limits, or when you face challenges that test your abilities. It can feel intense, but it's temporary and purposeful. It's the kind of discomfort that strengthens you, teaches you, and expands what you're capable of handling. One of the reasons growth feels uncomfortable is because it requires uncertainty. You don't always know if your efforts will pay off, if you'll succeed, or how long it will take to see results. That lack of certainty can be unsettling, especially if you're used to having control. But certainty is often an illusion. Even in familiar situations, nothing is guaranteed. Growth simply makes that uncertainty more visible. Another factor is that growth demands effort and consistency. It's not just about making one big change. It's about showing up repeatedly, even when it's difficult. This can feel exhausting at times, especially when progress is slow. You might question whether it's worth it or whether you're even making a difference. These moments are part of the process, not signs that you should quit. There's also a psychological aspect to discomfort. As you grow, you begin to outgrow old habits, environments, and sometimes even relationships. This can create a sense of disconnection or loneliness. You're no longer fully aligned with your past, but you haven't completely settled into your future either. That in-between space can feel uncertain, but it's also where transformation happens. It's important to understand that discomfort is not something you need to eliminate. It's something you need to manage. Instead of avoiding it, you learn to tolerate it, even expect it. You begin to see it as feedback rather than a threat. When something feels difficult, instead of stepping back, you ask yourself what it's trying to teach you. Over time, your relationship with discomfort changes. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once scared you becomes something you can face with confidence. This doesn't mean it ever becomes easy, but it does mean you become stronger. You build resilience, the ability to keep going despite challenges, and that resilience becomes one of your greatest strengths. The key is to stay focused on the long-term outcome rather than the short-term feeling. In the moment, discomfort can feel like a reason to stop. When you accept that progress is more important than perfection, it becomes easier to take that first step. Building accountability can also reduce the power of excuses. When you set clear expectations for yourself and track your actions, it becomes harder to hide behind vague reasons. You see exactly what you're doing and what you're avoiding. This awareness pushes you to be more intentional with your choices. Over time, as you stop giving in to excuses, you begin to rebuild trust in yourself. You prove that you can follow through even when it's difficult. This strengthens your confidence and reduces the influence of fear. The more you act, the less control your excuses have over you. Excuses will never completely disappear. Your mind will always try to protect you from discomfort in some way. But you don't have to listen to every thought that comes up. You can acknowledge the excuse, understand where it's coming from, and still choose to act. At the end of the day, your progress depends on what you do, not what you say or think. Every time you choose action over excuses, you take a step forward. And those steps, no matter how small, are what create real change. One of the biggest misconceptions about change is that it requires a massive, life-altering move right from the beginning. People often believe they need a surge of motivation, a perfect plan, or a dramatic shift to finally turn things around. But real, lasting change rarely works that way. It starts small. So small that it almost feels insignificant. And that's exactly why most people overlook it. Starting with small actions removes the pressure that usually comes with big goals. When you think about changing everything at once, it becomes overwhelming. Your mind starts to resist because the task feels too large, too uncertain, and too demanding. But when you shrink the focus down to one simple step, it becomes manageable. It feels possible. And that's all you need to begin. Small actions are powerful because they build momentum. When you take one step, no matter how minor it seems, you create movement. That movement makes it easier to take the next step, and then another. Over time, these small efforts begin to compound. What once felt difficult starts to feel natural, and what once seemed out of reach starts to come closer. Consistency is what turns small actions into meaningful results. It's not about doing something once and expecting immediate change. It's about repeating those actions regularly, even when they feel boring or unremarkable. This is where many people struggle. They underestimate the importance of consistency because the results are not instant. But the truth is, consistency is what separates temporary effort from real progress. Another benefit of starting small is that it helps you build confidence. When you set unrealistic expectations and fail to meet them, it reinforces self-doubt. But when you set achievable actions and follow through, you prove to yourself that you can do what you say you will do. That builds trust in yourself, and that trust becomes the foundation for taking on bigger challenges. Small actions also help you stay focused on the present. Instead of worrying about how far you have to go, you concentrate on what you can do right now. This reduces anxiety and keeps you grounded. You're no longer overwhelmed by the entire journey because you're only dealing with the next step. And as you continue, those steps start to add up. It's important to understand that small doesn't mean easy or unimportant. A small action can still require effort, discipline, and intention. The difference is that it's achievable. It doesn't rely on perfect conditions or high motivation. It relies on your willingness to act even when you don't feel like it. There will be days when you don't feel motivated, when progress seems slow, or when you question whether your efforts are making a difference. These are the moments that matter the most. Choosing to take a small step on those days is what builds resilience. Shows that you're not dependent on how you feel. You're committed to your action. Over time, these small actions begin to shape your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who waits or hesitates. You start to see yourself as someone who takes action, someone who follows through. This shift in identity is powerful because it changes how you approach challenges. You're not forcing yourself to act. You're acting because it's who you become. Another key aspect is patience. Small actions don't produce immediate dramatic results. They require time to grow into something meaningful. This can be frustrating in a world that often expects quick outcomes. But lasting change is not about speed, it's about sustainability. When you build something gradually, it becomes stronger and more stable. It's also worth noting that small actions give you room to learn and adjust. When you take big, sudden leaps, mistakes can feel overwhelming. But when you move step by step, you can adapt along the way. You can refine your approach, improve your methods, and learn from your experiences without feeling discouraged. The most important thing is to start. Not when everything is perfect, not when you feel fully prepared, but right now with whatever you have. The size of the step doesn't matter as much as the decision to take it. Because once you begin, you break the cycle of inaction. And once that cycle is broken, everything changes. At the end of it all, everything comes down to a simple truth. You already know what needs to change. You felt it, you've thought about it, and you've delayed it long enough. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't closed by waiting, overthinking, or making promises you don't keep. It's closed by action, by responsibility, by pushing through discomfort, and by refusing to let excuses control your life any longer. You don't need a new life overnight. You need a new direction, follow consistently. Step by step, choice by choice. You either move forward or you stay where you are. And if you're honest with yourself, staying the same is no longer an option.